The notification ping from my phone cut through the silence of my home office like a knife through butter at 11:47 p.m. I'd been staring at lines of code for the past 3 hours, debugging a payment system that refused to cooperate, when Olivia's text lit up my screen. "Don't worry, babe, it's just a girls' trip with shopping and spa treatments. Be back Sunday night. Love you." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and felt something twist in my gut. Not love, not even annoyance, just suspicion. My name is Ryan Mitchell, and I've been married to Olivia for 6 years. I'm 35, a senior software engineer at TechFlow Solutions, and I used to box in college before I discovered that debugging code paid better than getting punched in the face. These days, the only fighting I do is with stubborn algorithms and my wife's increasingly creative excuses. I typed back, "Hopefully the shopping and spa will be paid for by someone else." It was meant as a joke, but even as I hit send, I knew there was more truth in it than humor. Olivia had been distant lately, working late, taking mysterious phone calls that she'd end abruptly when I walked into the room. The kind of behavior that makes a man's imagination run wild in all the wrong directions. Our house in Meadowbrook Heights was the picture of suburban success. Smart home technology controlled everything from the temperature to the security cameras. Alexa reminded us about appointments we'd forgotten and played music we'd programmed her to think we liked. But tonight, surrounded by all this technological perfection, I felt more alone than I had in years. I minimized my code editor and opened Instagram, telling myself I was just taking a break. But my fingers seemed to have their own agenda as they navigated to Olivia's profile. Her latest story, posted just 20 minutes ago, showed her at Elevation Rooftop Bar downtown. She was laughing, surrounded by what looked like a mixed group of people, definitely not the all-female spa weekend she'd described. And there, with his arm casually draped near her shoulder, was Jake Morrison. Jake Morrison. My old college roommate turned finance bro, the guy who'd stolen my girlfriend junior year and then had the audacity to invite me to their engagement party. The same Jake who'd been sliding into Olivia's social media comments for months with increasingly familiar jokes and inside references I didn't understand. My phone buzzed with a direct message from Tommy Chen, my old friend who ran Iron Will Boxing Gym downtown. Tommy was ex-military, the kind of guy who noticed details other people missed and had a network of contacts that would make the FBI jealous. "Dude, you need to see this." The video he sent made my pressure spike. Olivia, definitely tipsy, arm in arm with Jake outside what looked like the Marriott by the airport. She was giggling at something he whispered in her ear, and the timestamp showed it was taken less than an hour ago. So much for the girls' trip. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the black computer screen. The face looking back at me was tired, older than 35, with the kind of lines around the eyes that come from squinting at code all day and trusting people who don't deserve it. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I got up, walked to my closet, and pulled out my old boxing gear. By midnight, I was in my car, driving through the rain-slicked streets toward the airport district. The Marriott sat like a glass and steel monument to business travelers and people conducting affairs they couldn't have at home. I parked across the street and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Jake's silver BMW pulled into the parking garage at 12:23 a.m. I watched through my windshield as he emerged, checking his reflection in the car window like the vain bastard he'd always been. He was wearing an expensive-looking jacket and had that confident swagger of a man who thought he was getting away with something. 15 minutes later, Olivia appeared at the hotel entrance. She looked around nervously before Jake appeared beside her, his hand on the small of her back as they walked toward the check-in desk. I sat there for another 20 minutes, watching the windows of the hotel, feeling something cold and methodical settle in my chest. This wasn't the hot anger of a betrayed husband. This was something else entirely. Something calculating. I got out of my car and walked to the parking garage. Jake's BMW was parked in a corner spot, probably chosen for privacy. I pulled out my pocket knife and methodically deflated all 4 tires, taking my time to ensure they'd be completely flat by morning. Then I took out a piece of paper I'd prepared and slipped it under Olivia's purse strap where I knew she'd find it. The note was simple. Hope you packed your dignity. As I walked back to my car, I noticed something that made me pause. A figure standing by the hotel entrance, partially hidden by a pillar. Even in the dim lighting, I recognized the silhouette of Cassie Williams, Olivia's best friend and co-worker. She was holding up her phone, and from the angle it looked like she'd been filming me. Cassie saw me notice her and quickly lowered her phone, but not before I caught the smirk on her face. It was the expression of someone watching a plan come together. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Olivia cheating. This was something bigger. I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing. Cassie had been pushing Olivia to live her life and not settle for boring for months. She'd been the one suggesting girls' nights out and weekend trips. She'd been the one posting those social media photos that seemed designed to make me look like the controlling husband who didn't understand his wife's need for independence. Back home, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in my living room, staring at the smart TV that reflected my face like a black mirror. Alexa's blue ring pulsed softly in the corner, always listening, always ready to help with whatever I needed. Alexa, I said quietly, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? Tomorrow in Meadowbrook Heights, expect partly cloudy skies with a high of 72 degrees, she replied in her artificially pleasant voice. Perfect weather for revenge, I thought, but didn't say it out loud. Even paranoids have to be careful what they say around smart speakers these days. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Having so much fun with the girls. Spa day tomorrow, then shopping. Love you. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, love you too, have fun. But as I hit send, I was already planning my next move. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. I'd barely slept, but I felt more alert than I had in months. Coffee tasted better, colors seemed brighter, and for the first time in years, I had a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with debugging code or meeting project timelines. I was going to destroy them all. The first step was gathering intelligence. I drove to Iron Will Boxing Gym, where Tommy was already working with his morning clients. The place smelled like sweat and determination, with the rhythmic sound of gloves hitting heavy bags, providing a soundtrack that took me back to my college days. You look like hell, Tommy said when he saw me, but he was grinning. And also like you're planning something that's going to get you in trouble. Maybe both, I admitted. I need a favor. Tommy Chen had been my roommate senior year after Jake moved out to live with his new girlfriend. Where Jake was all flash and charm, Tommy was solid and dependable. After college, he'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home and opening the gym with his military savings. He had the kind of practical skills and moral flexibility that made him the perfect ally for what I was planning. I showed him the video from last night and explained the situation. Tommy listened without judgment, nodding occasionally as he wrapped his hands for a training session. So what do you want to do about it? He asked when I finished. I want to make them famous, I said. All of them. Jake, Olivia, and especially Cassie. I want their dirty laundry aired in public, and I want them to know it was me who hung it out to dry. Tommy considered this while he worked the heavy bag, each punch precise and controlled. You sure about this path, Ryan? Once you start down this road, there's no going back. Your marriage is definitely over, and you're going to make some enemies. My marriage was over the moment she got in that car with Jake, I replied. I'm just making sure I'm not the only one who suffers for it." He stopped punching and looked at me seriously. "What do you need?" Over the next 2 hours, we planned what Tommy called Operation Transparency. The goal wasn't just revenge, it was complete social and professional destruction, carried out with surgical precision and plausible deniability. Tommy had contacts everywhere: private investigators who owed him favors, tech guys who could trace digital footprints, even a few people in the media who were always looking for juicy local stories. More importantly, he understood the psychology of public humiliation in the social media age. "The key," he explained while we worked out together, "is to make them destroy themselves. Give them enough rope, then document them hanging themselves with it." My phone buzzed with another text from Olivia. "Spa was amazing. Shopping now with the girls. Might be late tonight." I showed the message to Tommy, who laughed. "She's not even trying to be convincing anymore. That's either supreme confidence or total stupidity." "With Olivia, it's usually both," I said. That afternoon, I put the first phase of the plan into motion. Using techniques I'd learned in my cybersecurity training, I started building detailed profiles of Jake and Cassie's digital lives: social media posts, professional connections, financial information that was publicly available, relationship histories, and most importantly, their patterns of behavior. Jake was easy to figure out. He was a creature of habit who posted his entire life online: expensive restaurants, luxury cars, gym selfies, and professional humble brags about his success in finance. He was also careless about privacy settings and had a tendency to overshare when he'd been drinking. Cassie was more interesting. Her social media presence was carefully curated, but there were inconsistencies that suggested she was hiding something significant. Her job title at Morrison Marketing didn't match her lifestyle, and her posting patterns suggested she had a lot more free time than someone in her supposed position should have. Most intriguingly, she'd been posting cryptic messages about karma and people getting what they deserve for weeks. It was almost like she was documenting her own revenge plot in real time. By evening, I had enough information to start the real work. But first, I needed to set the stage for what was coming. I drove to Finnegan's Bar, a local dive where Jake and his finance bro friends liked to hold court on Saturday nights. The place was exactly what you'd expect: sticky floors, overpriced beer, and a karaoke setup that brought out the worst in everyone after 10 p.m. Jake was there, holding court at a corner table with 3 other guys in expensive casual wear. He was telling some story that involved a lot of hand gestures and seemed to center around his own cleverness. His audience was laughing at all the right moments, the way people do when someone is buying the drinks. I ordered a beer and found a spot at the bar where I could observe without being obvious about it. Jake was in full performance mode, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. He kept checking his phone and grinning at messages that were probably from Olivia. That's when I noticed something that made everything click into place. Cassie Williams was sitting alone at a table near the back, nursing a cocktail and watching Jake with an expression that wasn't quite admiration. It was more like a scientist observing a lab rat navigate a maze. She saw me notice her and raised her glass in a mock toast. Even across the crowded bar, I could see the satisfaction in her smile. That's when I knew for certain. Cassie wasn't just enabling Olivia's affair. She was orchestrating it. Sunday evening, Olivia came home with shopping bags and a story about how wonderful her weekend had been. She was glowing in that way people do when they think they're getting away with something, animated and affectionate in a way she hadn't been with me in months. "You should have seen the spa, Ryan," she said, unpacking expensive lotions and bath products I was certain she'd bought herself as props. And the shopping was incredible. Cassie found this amazing boutique that had everything on sale. I nodded and made appropriate interested sounds while she performed her elaborate deception. It was almost impressive how detailed her lies were, complete with photos she'd obviously staged and receipts from places she'd clearly visited alone. "I missed you," she said, wrapping her arms around me from behind while I pretended to read emails on my laptop. "I missed you too," I lied back. That night, she was more passionate than she'd been in months, and I realized she was probably thinking about Jake while she was with me. The thought should have made me angry, but instead it just made me more determined to see my plan through to the end. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day implementing Phase 2 of Operation Transparency. Using information Tommy had gathered over the weekend, I created anonymous social media accounts and began systematically documenting Jake and Olivia's affair. The beautiful thing about cheaters is that they're incredibly predictable. They go to the same places, use the same excuses, and follow the same patterns. Jake always went to the gym at 6 a.m., grabbed coffee at the same Starbucks, and worked late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The same days Olivia had started working late. I spent the week building a comprehensive timeline of their relationship, complete with photos, timestamps, and corroborating evidence. But more importantly, I was laying the groundwork for their public destruction. The breakthrough came on Thursday evening. Tommy called me with information that changed everything. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Remember how you thought Cassie was orchestrating this whole thing? Well, you were right, but not for the reasons you thought." He'd had one of his private investigator contacts do a deep dive into Cassie's background, and what they'd found was explosive. Cassie Williams had been fired from her previous job at TechFlow Solutions, my company, 3 years ago for embezzling client funds. The termination had been handled quietly to avoid bad publicity, but the records were still there for someone who knew where to look. And the executive who had recommended her termination? Me. "She's been planning this for years, Ryan," Tommy explained. "Getting close to Olivia, becoming her best friend, slowly poisoning your marriage from the inside. Jake's just a convenient tool. You're the real target." Suddenly, everything made sense. Cassie's constant suggestions that Olivia deserved better, her encouragement of girls' nights out and weekend trips, her subtle undermining of our relationship disguised as friendship. She'd been systematically destroying my marriage as revenge for destroying her career. "There's more," Tommy continued. "Jake doesn't know about Cassie's history with you. As far as he knows, she's just Olivia's friend who thinks he's charming. He has no idea he's being manipulated." That night, I lay awake next to Olivia, listening to her breathe and planning the endgame. Cassie thought she was the puppet master, pulling everyone's strings from behind the scenes, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I wasn't just going to expose the affair, I was going to expose everything. Friday afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Finnegan's Bar, 8 p.m. Come alone." I knew it was from Cassie without having to ask. The puppet master was ready for the final act. I arrived at Finnegan's early and chose a table with a clear view of the entrance. The bar was crowded with the usual Friday night crowd, providing perfect cover for what was about to happen. I'd spent the morning preparing for this confrontation, and I was ready. Cassie arrived exactly at 8, dressed in black jeans and a leather jacket that made her look like she was auditioning for a role as a femme fatale in a low-budget thriller. She spotted me immediately and walked over with the kind of confidence that comes from thinking you hold all the cards. "Hello, Ryan," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." "I couldn't agree more," I replied. "Let's start with why you've been systematically destroying my marriage for the past 2 years. Her smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Olivia makes her own choices." "Does she? Or does she just follow the suggestions of her best friend who's been feeding her a steady diet of poison about how she deserves better than her boring husband?" Cassie leaned back in her chair, studying me with new interest. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, but not smart enough, apparently, since your wife is still sleeping with Jake Morrison in cheap hotel rooms." The words were meant to wound, but I felt nothing except cold satisfaction. She was showing her hand, confirming everything I'd suspected. "Here's what's going to happen," she continued. "You're going to file for divorce quietly, take whatever settlement Olivia offers, and disappear from our lives. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows what a controlling, abusive husband you really are." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. The recording app was clearly visible, and the red dot showed it had been running for the past 5 minutes. "That's interesting," I said. "Tell me more about how you plan to frame me as abusive. I'd love to hear the details." For the first time since I'd known her, Cassie Williams looked genuinely rattled, but she recovered quickly, reaching across the table to grab my phone. I was faster. Years of boxing training had left me with reflexes she couldn't match, and I pulled the phone back before she could reach it. "Did you really think I'd come here unprepared?" I asked. "After everything you've done, did you think I'd just roll over and let you destroy me?" She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You have no idea who you're messing with, Ryan. I will destroy you." "No," I said quietly. "You won't. Because I know exactly who you are, Cassie. I know about the embezzlement. I know about the termination. I know about the 3 years you've spent planning this revenge. And tomorrow morning, everyone else is going to know too." The color drained from her face. "You can't prove anything." "Can't I?" I stood up as well, towering over her. "I've spent the past 2 weeks building a case that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Financial records, social media posts, witness statements, even security camera footage from the hotel where you've been orchestrating Jake and Olivia's meetings." I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Did you enjoy watching my life burn? Because tomorrow, you're going to find out what it feels like when the flames come for you." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating her options. Then she turned and walked away, without another word. But I wasn't done with her yet. Not even close. Saturday morning, I woke up before dawn and began implementing the final phase of my plan. Tommy arrived at 6 a.m. with coffee and the kind of grim determination that made him such an effective ally. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked one last time. "Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back." "They destroyed my life," I replied. "Now it's their turn." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than confronting them privately or trying to work things out like a mature adult, I was going to expose everything publicly, simultaneously, and with enough evidence that denial would be impossible. I'd spent 2 weeks creating anonymous social media accounts, building networks of fake followers, and preparing a multimedia presentation that would make their infidelity and Cassie's manipulation impossible to ignore. But the real genius was in the timing and the audience. Jake Morrison worked for Pinnacle Financial, a conservative firm that prided itself on family values and professional integrity. Olivia worked for Morrison Marketing, a company that specialized in reputation management for high-profile clients. And Cassie, despite being fired from TechFlow, had somehow managed to get hired at a nonprofit that worked with victims of financial fraud. All 3 of them had professional reputations that wouldn't survive public scandal. At 9 a.m., I began posting. The first wave hit Jake's professional network. LinkedIn posts with detailed timelines of his affair, complete with photos, hotel receipts, and screenshots of his increasingly desperate attempts to hide his activities from his girlfriend. The posts were shared from accounts that appeared to belong to concerned colleagues and industry contacts. Simultaneously, Olivia's social media was flooded with evidence of her deception: the fake spa weekend, the elaborate lies, the photos she'd staged to support her story. Everything was laid out in excruciating detail. But the real damage came from the screenshots of her private messages with Jake, messages that revealed not just the affair, but her complete contempt for our marriage and her plans to divorce me once she'd secured a better financial situation. Cassie got special treatment. Her exposure included not just her role in orchestrating the affair, but her entire history of manipulation and revenge. The embezzlement, the termination, the 3-year campaign to destroy my marriage. Everything was documented with the kind of thoroughness that comes from having unlimited time and unlimited motivation. But the masterpiece was the video. Tommy had helped me set up hidden cameras in my own home, focusing on the living room where Cassie and Olivia had spent countless hours planning their campaign against me. The footage showed them laughing about my ignorance, discussing strategies for making me look controlling and abusive, and most damning of all, Cassie explicitly stating her desire for revenge over her termination from TechFlow. The video went viral within hours. By noon, my phone was buzzing with calls and messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some were supportive, others were shocked, but everyone wanted to know if the allegations were true. I let them wonder. At 2 p.m., Jake called me directly. His voice was shaking with rage and desperation. "You psycho!" he screamed into the phone. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My job, my reputation, my relationship. You've destroyed everything." "I haven't destroyed anything," I replied calmly. "I've just made your choices public. Don't blame me for the consequences of your own actions." "This isn't over," he threatened. "I'm going to sue you for defamation, harassment, invasion of privacy, everything I can think of." "Good luck with that," I said. "Everything I posted is true and documented. But please, by all means, drag this out in court for months, where even more details will become public record." He hung up on me. Olivia arrived home at 4 p.m., her face streaked with tears and her hands shaking. She'd obviously seen the posts, and the reality of her situation was finally sinking in. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded. "I'm your wife." "Were," I corrected. "You were my wife. Now you're just someone who used to live in my house." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. "Ryan, please. We can work this out. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. I love you." "No, you don't," I said. "You love the security I provide. You love the house and the lifestyle and the social status. But you don't love me, and honestly, I don't think you ever did." "That's not true." I pulled out my laptop and showed her the screenshots of her messages with Jake, the ones where she called me boring and predictable, where she discussed her exit strategy, where she laughed about my complete obliviousness to her affair. "Your own words, Olivia, in your own voice. Don't insult my intelligence by trying to deny it now." She stared at the screen in horror, realizing that her private thoughts had become public knowledge. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter? The point is, everyone knows who you really are now. Your friends, your family, your co-workers. They've all seen what you're really like behind the mask." The final blow came at 6 p.m. when Cassie arrived at our house in a rage that made Jake's phone call look calm by comparison. "You snake!" she screamed, bursting through the front door without knocking. "You've ruined everything, everything I worked for, everything I built. It's all gone because of you." "Just like you ruined my marriage," I replied. "How does it feel, Cassie? How does it feel to have your life destroyed by someone you underestimated?" She lunged at me, but I sidestepped easily. Years of boxing had left me with reflexes she couldn't match, and her rage was making her clumsy. "I should have destroyed you completely when I had the chance," she snarled. "You tried," I said, "but you made one crucial mistake. You assumed I was weak because I'm not flashy like Jake, not manipulative like you. You thought I'd just accept whatever you did to me and suffer in silence." I walked closer, forcing her to back up. "But here's what you never understood about me, Cassie. I'm an engineer. When something breaks, I don't just accept it. I figure out why it broke, and then I fix it. And if someone broke it on purpose, I make sure they can never break anything again." "The police," she started. "Won't help you," I finished. "Everything I did was legal. Embarrassing, humiliating, and professionally devastating, but completely legal. You, on the other hand, have some explaining to do about that embezzlement conviction that you failed to disclose to your current employer." Her face went white. You didn't. I did. Funny how nonprofit organizations feel about hiring people with fraud convictions, especially when they find out about it from anonymous tips backed up with court documents. Both women left that evening, and I never saw either of them again in person. But their social media profiles told the story of their complete social and professional destruction over the following weeks. Jake lost his job at Pinnacle Financial and was forced to move back in with his parents while he looked for work in a different industry. His girlfriend left him, his friends abandoned him, and his professional reputation was so thoroughly destroyed that he eventually had to change careers entirely. Olivia was fired from Morrison Marketing after their clients began canceling contracts, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. She moved back to her hometown and took a job at a small marketing firm for a fraction of her previous salary. Our divorce was finalized within 3 months, and she got nothing beyond her personal belongings. Cassie had it worst of all. The nonprofit fired her immediately, and the scandal made it impossible for her to find work in her field. The last I heard, she was working retail and living in a studio apartment, her dreams of revenge having backfired so completely that she'd destroyed herself more thoroughly than I ever could have. As for me, I took a promotion at TechFlow and bought a smaller house in a different neighborhood. I started boxing again at Tommy's gym and discovered that I was happier alone than I'd ever been in my marriage. 6 months later, I was at a coffee shop near my office when I saw Jake Morrison for the first time since the scandal. He was working behind the counter, wearing a uniform shirt and looking like he'd aged 10 years in 6 months. He saw me, and his face went pale, but he couldn't exactly run away from his job. I walked up to the counter and ordered a large coffee, black. "That'll be $3.50, he said quietly, unable to meet my eyes. I handed him a $5 bill and told him to keep the change. As he handed me my coffee, I leaned across the counter and spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. "I hope it was worth it, Jake. I hope those few months with my wife were worth losing everything you'd worked for your entire adult life." He didn't respond, but I could see his hands shaking as he turned away. I walked out of that coffee shop and never looked back. Some people might say what I did was cruel, that I went too far in my revenge. But those people never had their lives systematically destroyed by people they trusted. I gave them exactly what they deserved. The truth about who they really were, delivered to everyone they'd ever tried to impress. And in the end, that was more devastating than any physical revenge could ever have been.